Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Data-Driven Culture Transformation, Go Beyond Vanity Metrics. This event is being presented by HR Morning as well as Instapage, Clymer and Looker, and is being sponsored by Looker. My name is Tyrone, and I will be your moderator for today's 60-minute event. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. This presentation can be retrieved via the handout section in the control panel. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box in the control panel as well. If they're regarding the subject being presented, I'll add them to the queue for questions at the end. Please remember that it is a violation of our copyright to record the conference. Now I'd like to introduce to you our first speaker, Ginny Tonkin.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to speak with everybody today. Let's just advance the slides and get right into it. All right, so let's go one more slide and get into a little bit about Instapage. So just to set the scene for a little bit, Instapage was the client of Clymer and Looker, and wanted to give you a quick little background on what Instapage is so you understand what we're dealing with here. Instapage offers the advertising conversion cloud. Essentially what that means is it's turning your digital advertising clicks into conversions, so getting more ROI for the budget that you're already using. Our mission is to automate advertising conversion, and our vision is that every potential customer gets a personalized post-click experience. Let's advance the slide. All right, so a little bit about Instapage. We have just over 200 employees in 3 different countries around the globe. So our headquarters is in San Francisco, but we also have offices in Poland and in Romania. We are at our Series A funding with Morgan Stanley, and we are top rated on G2 Crowd and Trustpilot. We're driving conversions for some of the customers that you might have seen before, including ING, Kaplan, Plymouth Rock, Airbnb, and HelloFresh, and hopefully maybe some of you in the future. So something crazy that blew my mind when I first heard it is that 96% of ad clicks just don't convert. That means that 96% of your ad spend is completely wasted. I can think of no other situation or happenstance where it's okay to tell your boss, I'm sorry, but I wasted 96% of your budget. But that's essentially what we're doing with our digital advertising today. So using something like Instapage has proven up to 4 times the conversion lift. So as I mentioned previously, we're wasting 96% of our budget. The average PPC conversion rate is 3.75%. But using something like Instapage to optimize your post-click experiences increases your conversion rate to 16.2%. So that's why it's so important to focus on that post-click automation process of your marketing funnel. Let's take a look at the next slide. So we're just going to touch here on something I'm sure you're all familiar with. This is the advertising funnel. But like I said before, it's super important to own the post-click experience to get more from the ad spend that you're already using. So on the left side of the screen, we're seeing something that looks like a B2B funnel. So at the top of our advertising funnel, we have platforms like Google Ads, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. But as we move further down the funnel, what is in between the marketing automation or acquisition stage of the funnel? This is post-click automation, and that's why it's so important to use something like Instapage to help bring your users further down the funnel. Let's take a look at the next slide. So it's important to stop wasting your advertising budget. For every $92 spent driving ad clicks, advertisers and PPC marketers are only spending $1 on converting them. So if we look at the graphic on the right side, we see so much money is spent on the pre-click side, which of course is important. That acquisition is so important, but we only spend $1 on that post-click part of the funnel. And of course, that conversion, what good is having the click if you're not converting the lead? So 62% of businesses are spending less than 10% of their ad budget on driving conversions. And what we're also finding is that only 15% have more than 5 conversion optimized landing pages to match their ads. It's important to have a variety of landing pages and a variety of post-click experiences to truly optimize your ROI on your ad budget. Let's advance. Okay, so I'm just going to show you and talk to you a little bit about best practices before we jump in here. It's easier to convert a click that you already have than to acquire a new click. So let's work on the leads that we already have and convert them into paying customers. All right, one of the things that I say is it's so important to give every ad and audience a personalized post-click experience. So if we think about Airbnb, for example, they have audiences in multiple geographies, right? They probably have people that they're seeking in London, in Sydney, in Boston. But the ads that you're going to have in Boston shouldn't have a post-click experience like they would for those, in Sydney. So it's important to give every ad and audience a personalized post-click experience for that audience. So for example, in Sydney, we will have, for the ad side, Sydney-centric language, Sydney-centric imagery, and when we move to the post-click part of that funnel, we will have, again, Sydney-centric language and imagery to help personalize that post-click experience for that unique audience. Let's move ahead. Personalization is very important for this conversion. What we suggest is aiming for one-to-one ad-to-page personalization. In order to do this, you pair every ad and every audience with a personalized post-click experience. Here, you're able to highlight the audience you're going to reach, and I recommend using dynamic text replacements. So for example, if you are like Airbnb and you're using different geographies, you can use dynamic text replacement to change, for example, the city name for who you're targeting. Always be testing. Instapage also offers a optimization suite, including A/B testing and heat maps, and it's so important to always be testing. So one thing I do suggest is, it's important to test for your specific audiences. So for example, if you have, say, an advertising, you're a B2B client and you have a demand gen audience and you have an advertiser's audience, those same audiences aren't going to relate to the same language. So it's important that you do your testing for each specific audience too. And how can we do that to ensure that we know what results are making a difference? Well, I suggest starting out with a MVP, a minimum viable page. Don't try to do it all at once, but just go incrementally. If you take it step by step, you'll be able to see, okay, this change that we made this impact. And that way you know where your ad dollars are going to make the most difference. Let's move ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chow. I'm actually the director of product here at Instapage. And I've been working really closely with Clymer and Clymer, as well as with Looker, just over the last year, getting kind of this new analytics system set up and trying to solve some more business problems. So what I'd like to talk about today are some of the problems and challenges that Instapage faced last year, just from the data side, and why we ended up partnering with Clymer and Looker as solutions to help our business grow. But before we dive into that, I think it's really helpful for us to start from the beginning and talk talk about some of these problems and how they first started around data, right? So to start, traditionally Instapage has really been a company that's been focused on qualitative feedback. We've had a tremendous amount of success by talking with our customers to discover, what their problems were, and work together with them to develop solutions to address those problems. It worked really well in the beginning when we had a small number of customers and had similar goals with each other. We were able to build products and features based on what they wanted and enable them to be more successful. But as we started to grow and as we started to add more customers, we really needed to find a scalable way to discover customer problems and monitor how successful our customers were. So if we look back, just a year ago, we realized that we had a few fundamental problems that we really needed to address on the data side in order for us to move forward with our business. Problems that we turned to Data Clymer and Looker to help with. So here, when we look at some of the challenges, the first one really is around data quality, right? So we had constant issues with data quality. Senior leaders no longer trusted our data. We were seeing deviations between what our customers were experiencing inside of the application, and it really wasn't a whole lot, right? So sometimes it was 5% or 10% in the amount of visitors, but that starts to add up and it starts to create a lot of mistrust within that data. I remember having a conversation even with our VP of marketing and asking her, if she had enough access to product data to do her job successfully, and she told me that, really having access to clean product data was her biggest pain point. She had a tough time of analyzing how her marketing campaigns were performing based on product usage or engagement. And she was really relying on analytics directly inside her marketing tools alone to measure success. The second challenge we had, were issues with data instrumentation and tracking critical events. From a business side, one of our key goals that we identified as bringing on Data Clymer and Looker was really to help us identify that North Star metric that could rally our entire product development team around and really move the needle, right? But as we started to dig in, we started to discover that we had serious issues around data instrumentation and tracking. So we really needed to go through that instrumentation with a fine-tuned comb to find out, where we had these problems and where we needed to fix, right? The next problem that we had was a complex application data model that made it very easy to make mistakes with ad hoc requests. So the reason why this happened was that Instapage's entire engineering team sits in Poland right now. It's about 100 engineers and support staff. So there's really a natural kind of language barrier there, and also a time difference, right? So, and as you can imagine, when the engineers first started to define some of these databases, we had a real difficult time in interpreting them because of that language barrier and that time difference. And to add on top of that, we had a bit of technical debt that started to pile up over the years that required our engineering team to handle exceptions and edge cases in the business logic than on the database side, right? So combining all of that together, it really created an incredibly complex application data model that we needed to start to entangle. Right. The last problem that we had was really an inability to query unstructured data and attach it to the data model, right? So what we do here at Instapage is to help our customers create post-click experiences, which are essentially landing pages using our drag and drop builder. And we store that information in a really unstructured way. So at one point, I really needed to make a product decision based on the data. And I remember having to ask our engineering teams to mine that data themselves to allow us to make that decision. And as a product leader, that once you're having to make the trade-off between data mining tasks and product features, you really need to find a new solution if you're not delivering value to customers. So when we looked at some of the solutions, we really worked with both Data Clymer and Looker. From Data Clymer's side, they helped us expose the data, pipe it into our new warehouse for Snowflake, and really started to quickly help us answer some business level questions. And once we had access to that data, we started to ask more questions about the data. Before, we were looking primarily at vanity metrics, right? Graphs that always moved up and to the right. How many customers we were acquiring, how many pages they were building, and how many pages went live on our systems. And these were metrics that sounded great in a TechCrunch article or a Forbes article, but ones that really didn't help us answer true fundamental business questions, such as why are some of our customers activating and some of our customers not, or what engagement metric is truly tied to customer retention. When we're looking at the data model side, Looker really helped us to quickly build and QA that model, right? So we use Looker as a way to map how our data related to one another. And for Instapage, since we're a landing page platform, we really needed to track every individual visitor to a landing page, our customer's customer, as well as which customer created that page and which one of their team members ultimately made that edit. So being able to link all that information together was a real challenge. And by using a platform like Looker, we really didn't need to perform complex ETL transformations or even denormalize data within our warehouse. You could really keep everything in the most granular level of detail, and our data warehouse and really used Looker to perform those transformations, which helped us identify insights much quicker. We didn't have our data engineers working in the data warehouse and on one platform and analysts working on the data visualizations. Everyone was able to work with it on the same platform, which made things go much, much smoother. And the last solution that we had is, we were lucky that we ended up picking Snowflake as our data warehouse because it really helped us transform, unstructured and semi-structured data. So, since Snowflake natively supports JSON structures, we were able to quickly structure that data into a format that our data analysts could work with. We no longer needed to ask engineers to really go and mine that data or to make trade-offs between product features and product insights. And I'm really happy to say that after, this year, since we signed on with Data Climber, we started to use Looker, that we really haven't had a single engineering request to pull data. Everything now is managed by our data team, and our product teams can really focus on solving customer problems. Let's move on to the next slide. So the second problem that we had is around data definitions, right? They really manifested in two ways. The first is issues with how we define metrics such as churn, activation, and engagement. And as an organization, we've really never had a chance to sit down and ask ourselves the questions, right? Which metrics helped us move the needle? We were able to see generalized metrics around churn, around activation, around engagement, but how should we define that, right? Was 30-day churn more important to us because it was a metrics that we could directly influence with the product experience, or was it engagement and trying to see which customers were engaging most with us and how that translated to actual attention? The second was, we didn't really have a defined data dictionary. Teams were really interpreting data incorrectly and differently. As an organization, you're really not in the best situation when you have a CEO asking different department heads, how they're measuring and reporting different activation and churn metrics, and you find that they're reporting things that are very different. And when I started to dig deeper into some of these problems, you discover that you may have two analysts that are working in both those departments that really aren't communicating. They have their own SQL scripts or they have their own custom-built Tableau dashboards that interpret the data in very different ways. And by having Looker and Snowflake and having everything consolidated, really had the ability to work from a single platform, which forced people in the data team to start to have to agree on how we define the data and how it really improved collaboration between these team members. From a solution standpoint, Data Climber from their side really helped us work together to be able to define these key metrics across departments, right? So Aaron sat down with the rest of our team, talked to all our key business stakeholders about which metrics mattered most. We discovered that over time that customer engagement was truly our North Star metric. How many people were creating pages and pushing them live, right? So with data, we started to realize that this engagement metric closely correlated with customers retaining. And because of this work, we were able to focus our product development efforts to drive that behavior. We wanted people to be logging in more, creating more pages, pushing them live, and it really helped us move our business forward. From Looker's perspective, they really gave us the ability to quickly define dimensions and create kind of that source of truth within the platform. So now, our data analysts and data engineering teams all work from the same platform, and we can agree on data definitions. It's really improved transparency to the teams, and it really helped us work better together. Let's move on to the next slide. And as the last problem that we really had was really around data democratization, right? So, as a problem, we realized that our data analysts were really mostly handling ad hoc requests. We had a really big bottleneck around our data analysts. They were supporting data requests from an entire organization, and they could hardly keep up with them, right? So we had an endless backlog of simple questions that analysts needed to help with. And we started to peel this back a little bit. We realized that a lot of these data requests were coming from, different departments were really similar. We had a Trello board set up where team members from across the company would submit these requests. And we started to see a trend that they were similar, right? So how many pages did one customer create? How much traffic did this customer have within the last 6 months? And I started to notice that our analysts were just using the same SQL scripts, the same query requests that if we could have a functioning analytic system for everyone to use, people would just be able to self-solve themselves. And the last problem that we have is that really we had no bandwidth for our data analysts to perform really deep level analytics. So because they were flooded with so many requests, they couldn't do like the previous engagement analysis project that I was mentioning, where we could really find that North Star metric, because they were just doing day-to-day requests, right? From a solutions perspective, Looker really consolidated all the metrics, but more importantly, all the data visualization tools within a single platform, right? So we no longer had different departments using different data visualization tools like Tableau or Power BI. We were able to get everyone onto the same platform, and people started to ask more questions from data, usually cross-pollinating between departments, right? So we, because of Looker, we've been able to implement a customer health dashboard for our support teams. We've created dashboards for our sales teams to see which customers were great candidates to upsell, and we had opportunities there too, right? right? Clymer themselves helped us train the entire staff here, and it really significantly reduced the number of ad hoc requests. Departments that didn't have data analysts before in the past started to query analytics themselves. They started to self-solve, right? We have champions now in every one of the departments, and even some of those champions have gone so far as to dive deeper into Looker and doing, some work that analysts would really be doing. So it's really helped us as an organization try to look at data as something that every single department can do. And lastly, most importantly, we really freed up our data analysts to go start digging into data such as retention analysis, finding North Star metrics. I mean, that's really what we wanted, is to have them doing work that really impacted positively the business. Let's go on to the next slide. And as extra benefits, one thing that I'll mention is that, Instapage has almost 1 billion visitors to our landing pages per year, right? So there's a pretty good chance that you've seen an Instapage landing page without knowing it if you've ever clicked on a digital ad. And as part of that, we collect a ton of anonymized data for visitors that land on these pages. And in the past, we've stored them in our data warehouse. We really never shared that with external customers. But after introducing Looker, we now have the ability to share audience data with our customers, where they're from, what time of day they're actually if they came back, and providing these, advanced analytics and insights to some of our largest customers. It's really enabled them to find more insights and allow them to be able to more smartly target their ads and their audiences. And by using Looker alone, we've really opened up kind of this entirely new revenue stream that we can use to quickly iterate on without doing any additional development work. So, one thing that we have going for us in the future for Instapage is we're going to be offering this fulfillment type of service where we are doing the post-click conversion optimization for them. And one of the things that we're building into that is the analytics tool with Looker to embed that, so that it's really an external facing product. And the reason why we're doing that is because it's going to be a lot faster to development, to iterate, and it's something that we already have built, right? So all in all, by working with Data Clymer and selecting Looker as our data visualization tool and platform, and choosing Snowflake as our data warehouse, we were able to radically change our data culture for the better. And looking back after year, we're in a much better spot with our analytics stack. And right now, what I'll do is I'll actually hand it over to Aaron Clymer, so he can talk a little bit more about how he built the analytics system and how he helped kind of solve some of these core issues with the data stack.
Thanks, Jan. That was a great explanation and summary of where you've gone in your data journey and where we're going next. So let me introduce myself a little more. My name's Aaron Clymer. I'm CEO and founder of Data Clymer. We're a consulting firm with deep experience democratizing data and helping companies adopt a data-driven culture. And we do this by implementing full cloud data stack systems and ensuring that everyone in the company learns how to ask questions in a self-service way. So very much exactly what Jan outlined. And in the next few slides, I'm just going to go over a little more of the technical implementation and also process implementation that we've implemented at Instapage to help along this data journey. So next slide, please. So this is a high-level logical kind of architecture diagram of the data pipeline, the data system. So just want to give you a sense of the complexity and all of the different things that we're bringing together. On the left-hand side, you can see the sources of our data. So the very top left MySQL database is Instapage's production database that's running all of their customers' pages and sort of the page builder and allowing customers to manage their accounts and all of that. The next one is a Mongo database. That contains a lot of the usage and traffic information that's anonymized, so we can get a sense of understanding customer success, essentially with things like the post-click conversions that Ginny and Jan were going over as they have the key value add of Instapage. So that's a pretty important data set. And then down below, we've got some other different sources. Product events are all the clicks, other clicks that customers are using, are doing in the application. Stripe for some payments, Salesforce for other actually payment information, and a lot of obviously customer information, and Marketo for a lot of the marketing events. So we take all of these sources and we pipe them into a Snowflake data warehouse with a combination of tools, Apache NiFi, using Amazon S3 as a backend, and Segment as another event streaming and replication tool. So combination of these, depending on the source, and then we sort of pipe everything into Snowflake in more of a staging environment, kind of represented by those little table diagrams on the left-hand side of the Snowflake data warehouse there. And then really the one of the critical steps of this process and part of how we solved the problems that Jan was outlining with data quality issues and sort of complexity of raw data is take all those raw tables, which are quite complex, and join them all together and organize them in such a way that it's much easier and fast to do analytics. So we create this analytics data model or in an analytics schema in Snowflake, actually using Looker to do that. I'll get into that a little more detail. But that's sort of the key, right? Because without that, it still is very difficult to understand the data. And the whole goal here is to make it easy for end users, non-technical end users especially, to consume all of this data and do self-service analytics and answer a lot of the questions that they have and really become more powerful and impactful employees. So creating that schema is really the bulk of the work. You know, the amazing thing these days with cloud data systems like this is pretty much all cloud, is that, you know, installing and configuring each piece of this is pretty quick. The hard part is, again, organizing all that data in such a way that makes sense for end users. So that analytical data mart indicated on the Snowflake data warehouse is a lot of work, and we're actually still working on that because there's always changes to the source systems, first of all, and some of the data structures will either change or sort of the use and the meaning of them will be augmented. Or there's still edge cases we'll find that we weren't aware of, and we'll handle those edge cases in that model so that, again, end users don't have to worry about all the complexity of edge cases and just sort of, you know, just seeing a clean slate essentially in Looker. So again, that final data platform on the right-hand side, Looker. So Looker it's more than just a business intelligence system, but it definitely serves as a business intelligence layer. So you can do reporting, dashboarding, ad hoc queries, analysis. And it's really just generating SQL live against the Snowflake data warehouse. But again, the end users don't have to know any of that. They don't have to know SQL. They really just pick and choose some fields, some filters, you know, and start executing queries, building visualizations, dashboards. And then on top of that, there's a bunch of other powerful features that make it more of a platform. And I'll go into one of those in a little bit. But just wanted to clarify, you know, sort of all the technology that goes into this. And again, for those of you that might be familiar with data warehousing, there's lots of ways to create that analytics model, lots of different tools you can use. But there's still the business logic is still sort of not going to, you know, technology is not going to solve that. And in this case, again, we actually used Looker for this. So I just wanted to point out that one of Looker's key features is the ability to model all of your data within Looker directly. And so a lot of the definitions of that model in Snowflake is actually in Looker, and then but we save it off in Snowflake as a set of like materialized tables. So Looker's really makes that part pretty much as fast as it can be. And the other nice thing is that because changing that model as you know, requirements change or the data underlying data changes, the nature of the data, I should say. Because Looker is fully cloud-based, all browser-based, really easy to change the language development and modeling under covers. We can actually do that really quick. Within a matter of minutes, sometimes we can make a change, deploy it to production, and it's affecting hundreds of users, you know, instantly, and updating any dashboards that are affected and so forth. So it's all live, real-time, clean, and centralized. That's kind of the story here, right? Centralize all this, make it easy, and allow end users to just access it in the exact same way, so that nobody's calculating metrics differently or making any kind of mistakes, and it's more just analyzing data. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so a little more about some of the process that we've also implemented at Instapage along with the technology. This is really how we get a complete solution together for clients and ensure that culture really is evolved to be more data driven. So again, the analytics data model at the top, that's more technical, but that's kind of what I just reviewed. I think it's really important to have this clean, easy to understand, as easy as possible to understand data set. But then, you can put that in Looker, get it out to users, but there's still always a gap in understanding, right? A lot of end users may not necessarily even understand the power they have at their fingertips. They may not really get the data, the nature of the data, the grain of the data, understanding how much they can drill in and analyze and understand. So we do a lot of training, and first we identify champions within each team, and we get them up to speed to be proficient both with Looker and the data. And I'll highlight that understanding the data is often more difficult than understanding Looker. It's the data itself that people really need to get used to and fully comprehend, so they can create powerful queries. And then we have them help train the rest of the teams. But we're always there for for support across the organization, of course. And we create a bunch of support channels. We definitely always install like a single Slack channel if we're using Slack, or any kind of community tool where the entire community can come together and answer each other's questions. And that pretty quickly becomes a really nice single source of support, and you can get answers very quick as an end user. Because Looker is all cloud, you can share dashboards, queries, reports easily with just a link that you can copy and paste right into Slack. And even better, Looker has an integration with Slack that makes it actually the ability for Looker to automatically send reports and dashboards to Slack to share with the community. So there's lots of ways to easily see what's going on in Looker from other tools. And we have a ticketing workflow for more formal requests for analysis. We've got a lot of one-on-one development sessions set aside with team members, and again, that's more because training in a classroom setting is almost never optimal for tools like this. You really want people to sit down and build something that they care about. So we always have people build a report or dashboard or do an analysis side by side with us, and make sure that they understand all of the fields and the filters they should be using. And again, it's more about the nature of the data, and then helping them understand some of the features like in Looker that they can use to expedite whatever they're doing or optimize the kind of visualizations that they're trying to build so they can tell the story they want to tell. And then another nice thing that we always try to do is set up wall monitors throughout an office, and go ahead and display things like KPIs. So you kind of want all your employees to be on the same page with the overall corporate goals, and understanding how the company as a whole is tracking toward those goals. It's a really nice way to do that by putting it up on your wall. And that really also helps spur conversations and help and gets people thinking about how they can contribute toward that goal. And then to follow on with that thought, if there's sort of all hands company meetings, I always recommend starting with the same dashboard that's on the wall monitors in the meetings. So we're looking at the same visualization, the same way of thinking about the data, and communicating that, or sort of making that putting more color into that with a conversation in front of all your employees. It really just helps the company culture become aligned on the goals. Everybody's sort of marching toward the same end, and so forth. So reinforcing data in all conversations and even in the hallways, is a great way to go. And we also put a leaderboard on there sometimes, so we know, or at least there's sort of a little bit of a gamification of people who's using Looker, who's actually taking advantage of the data with a leaderboard. These are just some of the ideas that and processes that we help implement. There's a much larger methodology that we employ as well, but I wanted to highlight some of the key changes. All right, next slide. All right, and in this slide, I actually just wanted to dive in a little more into some of the interesting analytical patterns that we've developed at Instapage specifically, just to give you an example of what that analytics data model can do for you. So, again, as you probably had gathered from my previous comments, it makes sense to take some pretty complicated raw tables and then just sort of join them together in a way that makes it a lot easier to understand. But there's always there's always use cases where you want to create brand new sets of data that are just modeled in such a way to answer specific business questions much easier. So the first one here, customer lifecycle data set, was a great example of this. So we have all the obvious data in our data Snowflake data warehouse now that gives you information about each customer, when they began a trial, when they began as a paying customer, what payment plan they're on, if they churn, when they churn, kind of why. But it's really hard to do trend analysis on those key points in a customer lifecycle easily when you just have the data in kind of one table like that. And on top of that, it gets more complicated because we wanted to do things like measure 30-day churn. And what that means is when a customer actually churns, it may not be really on purpose. It may be that they kind of ran through their payment plan and forgot to renew. Maybe auto renew wasn't on, so forth. Maybe there's a credit card issue. So we give people 30 days before we actually will call them churned. But calculating 30-day churn means that now you got to add 30 days essentially to the churn date of every customer. That's not so bad. But what gets bad is saying, okay, well, now what's our churn rate? Well, the churn rate is more complicated. So churn rate is the number of customers that churned after 30 days after their actual churn date is the numerator. And the denominator is the number of customers that were active 30 days prior. So you can imagine the date math just gets messy. So what we did is we created a whole nother table that really recalculates the state of the world for every calendar day going back 3 or 4 years. And that way, the end user can simply say, okay, I have one date I can choose, which is basically just a calendar date. You can show me a day, or you can show me a range of days, any range of dates, and very easily calculate the churn rate on either that day or the range of those days. You can calculate any other aspect of the customer lifecycle and get rates and averages over your entire customer base. Or you can easily slice it because we're not getting rid of details here. We're not getting rid of grain of data. It's still one row per customer per day. And so any dimension, any kind of information about that customer, you can still slice on. So it's very easy to create cohorts. So you can just imagine the power of something like this. Once you have this set up, the amount of questions are almost infinite. And just to add a little more color to that, every time you identify a different stage in the customer lifecycle that matters, you can easily add that to this data set. So Jan mentioned North Star metrics in terms of usage. We're currently trying to figure out exactly what would be, and we actually have, I think, the answer of how many pages or how often, what kind of usage pattern is sort of key for customer retention. So now we can sort of flag that in this data set, and for every point in time that every customer hits that key point, we can then report on it very easily, and we can talk about rates and percentages of customers that are at that point. So it's super powerful, but it actually ends up being a huge table. It's 1 billion rows because we're rejoining a bunch of data together over and over. But luckily, Snowflake can handle that volume. Looker can easily query it, so it turns out to be a great solution, and it's still very fast. And then the final example, second on the slide here, is just the fact that with payment plans in particular, with Instapage customers, they just happen to be coming from many different systems, and that's just because Instapage has evolved over time, had a lot of different kinds of customers, and payment methods are different. So again, if you're just trying to analyze something simple like how many paying customers do we have, well, without this analytical model and Looker, it's actually quite hard to write that query and make sure you're joining in all the right tables from all three, payment systems. Whereas we can predefine all that in our analytical model, and then in Looker, the end users just see a payment, flag, and they can filter on that, and it works kind of no matter where the payments came from. So just another two examples of the power of analytical data models. All right, next slide. And last but not least, I just wanted to highlight, again, going beyond business intelligence, Looker is a data platform because it can integrate with other tools and do a lot of automation. It'll create workflows for you that help people basically automate their daily tasks and create more efficiencies for the business. So in this case, Instapage is using Marketo. They wanted to update some key statistics about each customer in Marketo so that Marketo is always up to date and they don't have to do it by hand. And so we were able to create a Looker report that had a lot of the key details we needed about each customer, including a churn status in this case, and easily send that to Marketo on a regular basis by doing this integration. So Looker has a data action hub, and you can see Marketo is just one of the options. We can do this all without any real coding. It's all drag and drop on the UI, pretty easy. A non-technical user can pretty much do this. And once we get it integrated, it's up and running. And there's plenty of other systems that Looker can integrate with. So we were able to take advantage of that as well. And again, we are really, we're at a place with Instapage where this is all in place. All employees have access to this. They're doing self-service analytics. We're integrating with other systems. And we're just sort of continuing to evolve that analytics data model and evolve the type, even more data sets kind of being brought in to make the entire system even more powerful. So I hope that gives you a pretty good idea of the kinds of things you can do at your company with modern cloud data stacks like this, and some methodology around change management and sort of usage and training of these systems to drive a data-driven culture. Thank you very much. You can go to the next slide.
Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and I'm at Looker. I've been here about 4 years, and in that time, it's been neat to see, how kind of this cloud system has evolved. So one of our key beliefs at Looker is that companies do want to be data-driven, but often don't know how to get there. And I think Jan's introduction to kind of some of those problem statements was really powerful, and we see it a lot. In order to be data-driven, you need to have both trust of the data you're looking at, and you need to have access to it. And there are these two things that are almost a little bit conflicting. And so when we look at the problem statement, if we go to the next slide here, Looker, we often talk when we interact with customers, we talk about these problems either at data bottleneck, where the people who need access to data don't have the access. They have to go to an analyst and get in a queue. And by the time they want their next question answered, the kind of time to take action on it is past. Or we see data chaos. And so, again, we saw this in kind of the problem statements with Instapage where executives didn't necessarily trust the numbers. People were bringing different numbers to meetings. And so we start to spend our time having conversations about whose data is right, as opposed to what action can we take on this data. And so these are kind of the two challenges we see that really prevent organizations from becoming data-driven. And so Looker takes this cloud architecture approach, and this is, almost a little bit different view of what Aaron showed that he helped Instapage build. We take a modern stack approach, and so getting your data into a Snowflake, like Aaron showed, we think is the right philosophy for data analytics. It's going to give you that single source of truth. And also cloud databases are much faster and more performant and built for this type of analytics workload than in the past. And so we can use those databases to really drive data hungry organizations and get data to employees. And that's where Looker comes in. So Aaron talked about Looker as a data platform, and that's exactly how we view it. Business intelligence is going to be part of that, visualizations, self-exploration. So everything you would expect in a BI tool, but it's also driving data workflows. And so one of the things we've seen in kind of the modern workforce is people are used to getting data on their cell phone, on their iPad. Every app you go to is showing you data about what you're doing with that app. And so Looker is a platform that gives you the governance that we're talking about. It gives you the ability to define metrics in one place, but it also allows you to give access to your employees and start driving data workflows, driving data to Marketo, to Slack, starting customer cohorting and marketing messages. And that can all be done dynamically. It doesn't even need to have somebody doing it. We can schedule that or send those data based on alerts from the database. So business intelligence in this case goes a little bit beyond a visualization and into this world of how do we drive the right data to the right place or person at the right time. And that can even be beyond your employees, as both Aaron and Jan talked about, your customers. We can start to monetize that data now by using those same central definitions, the same underlying data sources, but delivering it to your customers in a secure, easily ingestible way. And so that's really what Looker's meant to do, is solve those problems of both trust. Everything's coming from the unified metrics. We can deliver the right data to the right people, but also access. Your data analyst can build in the model in one place, the logic, and everyone can use that to build their own queries. And the final piece that I want to mention here is that by relieving your analyst of being the bottleneck, by relieving that technical resource of being reactive to queries, that's where we can really start to move to these data-driven metrics and not the vanity metrics. So we heard from Aaron and Jan how they're actually changing their business based on meaningful data. The analysts can spend time thinking about how do we want to drive action as opposed to being reactive and just trying to fulfill query definitions. And then the final piece, of course, like Aaron was talking about, is those change metrics, putting data on the TVs so that everybody's talking about the same thing. And so Looker really allows you to build that environment where people can see data on a dashboard, drive it into workflows, look it up on your phone, and everybody's talking about the same key metric. So that's really Looker at a glance, and just wanted to kind of wrap up that we see this type of evolution of people with a lot of data to really building a world-class data organization internally a lot, and it's always exciting to see. And thank you, Jenny, Jan, and Aaron for walking us through your experience of that.
And thank you all. I would now like to take your questions. If you have any questions, please submit them into the chat box in the control panel. And while we wait for those, our first question came in via chat while we were running. All this technology is awesome, but what's the best way to ensure that it actually gets used?
Yeah, so hey, this is Aaron. I can take that. It's very much that sort of almost like soft skill of learning, I think, the data and making sure that employees understand the nature of the data. And it's usually about how much detail they can get. So it's easy to say, just show me how many customers we have that are doing X. But what more can I learn about these customers? And do I have all the information I need about them to fully understand what I need to understand? And so just knowing that you can do that, you can go to Looker, you can find all those fields, and you can report on them and analyze them in an ad hoc nature.
Thank you. And our next question is, when new data becomes available, how easy is it to incorporate into Looker?
Yeah, hey, this is Aaron. I can take that one too. You know, it's extremely easy. Looker data, when data shows up in a data warehouse, it doesn't automatically show up in Looker because of what Jake was just referring to, of the need to have some governance around your data, you know, and some control before you just release it to the wild. That's kind of that's really one of the key philosophies, I think, of Looker, is that you want to make sure that somebody who's an expert at that new data really understands it, knows how to bring it into that analytic data model, for instance, and how to join it to the rest of your data if necessary, and then how to expose it and exactly which fields should be exposed, what's the data definition for those fields, and how does it all get organized. So that's what you do in Looker. You do all that upfront development, which can be very quick, and then expose it in Looker that way. So there's one last step, but again, it's all for the benefit of ease of use and the ability for end users to really adopt the system.
Thank you, Aaron. And the next question reads, does Looker store any data?
Yeah, Jake,
I can answer that. Sorry, sorry, I have myself muted. Yeah, so Looker queries the database directly. So we have a caching layer for performance reasons, and as Aaron mentioned, we can write data back to the database because the modern databases are so powerful. That's where you want your data to be. So Looker doesn't have any long-term storage of the data, and we think that's actually a huge advantage, relying on these modern cloud databases.
Great, thank you. And our next question reads, how long is the implementation, connecting a database with Looker, and then building your first dashboard?
This is
Jake. You know, we see. I think Aaron laid out a really nice story that, in some ways, setting up the infrastructure is actually getting easier and easier, and a lot of it is about the change management. So we see people go from setting up a database and building a dashboard in a matter of a week, weeks, and not months, and then really how do we get people into that data? And Aaron, I don't know if you want to follow on there.
Yeah. I'd also just point out that it kind of depends on how clean and sort of nicely organized your data is from the beginning. Because if for some data sets we've seen a whole system stood up in days, so it can go from days to weeks, right? So it just depends on the sort of nature of the raw data. And again, I was pointing out how much time we've spent on the analytics data model with Instapage, but that's really directly a function of the complexity of the underlying data, especially since some of it's coming from an application, their application that's evolved over many years and just has a lot of nuances. But we've seen plenty of data sets in other clients that are quite much more straightforward and clean, and then you can be up and running very quickly.
And I think I would even take it one step further and say I think one of the things we've seen with Looker clients is this continual iteration. So that time to first dashboard can be very quick. But as you're thinking about, as you're allowed to now think about the metrics instead of just writing queries, you start to move into a kind of a higher order. So you can start to iterate on those metrics and think about the next thing. So there's this continuous journey of, okay, what's the next thing we want to set up that's pretty interesting.
Got it, thank you. And this goes back to the previous question. Does Looker integrate with BillQuick? It uses a SQL Server.
So Looker can connect directly to I think we're over 45 different SQL dialects, so we can connect directly to SQL Server. I'm, just to be honest, not familiar with BillQuick in particular.
And this is Aaron. I would also point out that usually the best practice is to take data from multiple systems and put it into one central data warehouse, like I was illustrating with Instapage. So in the case of BillQuick, I would usually recommend first getting that into a appropriate data warehouse, and combining it with other data that makes it much more powerful, and then and then having a full kind of solution. But if it's really just BillQuick and that's all you need, then yeah, as long as you can interpret the data coming from the database, you can connect Looker directly to it.
Great, thank you. And our last question reads, is Looker cloud or premise-based?
So Looker deploys kind of multi-cloud, so we can be cloud-based, and we can deploy on premises as well. We typically like to go cloud hosted because it's we can really manage things for the customer better that way.
Great, thank you. And that was our last question. I'll turn it back to you guys for any closing remarks.
This is Aaron. I would just say thank you again for attending and hearing about Instapage's data journey. Over and out for me. If anybody else has any closing remarks, that's great. Otherwise, I think we're done.
Yeah, thanks for everybody's time.
Great. Thank you, guys. And on behalf of HR Morning, I would like to thank everyone for attending the webinar. This concludes our program. Have a great rest of your day.